What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Imperfect. And today I have a guest that I've been wanting to get on the show for a minute. I've been looking for someone that would fit this kind of show topic for a minute because I want to have a very educated discussion and have somebody on the show that actually knows what they're talking about and is studying the field rather than just having somebody that has opinions. So we finally found someone. This is John Bolliger.
Nailed it.
On the set.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, great intro. I mean, I'm still an undergraduate. I'm definitely not a professional, so that was a very awesome intro, but thank you. It's really great to be on here. I really appreciate the offer to be on here. This is a really cool thing. I didn't even know that this podcast was a thing until you messaged me.
Really?
You messaged me. I looked up the podcast. I'm like, wow, this is actually like a really cool setup. It's
thank
great
you so
quality.
much.
And I got really excited to be on here, so I appreciate the invitation.
Well, thank you so much, man. It's been a lot of work building this podcast. So.
As I can imagine. You told me a lot about it, and I mean, that's a lot of work and dedication. It's really awesome what you got going on, man.
Heck yeah. Well, thank you so much, man. So first, I just want you to start out, like, why did you choose Idaho State to go to school, and what are you studying in, like, specifically?
Yeah, so this is my third year, so it's my sixth semester here at Idaho State University. I chose ISU. I never really considered otherwise, honestly. I just wanted to live at home. ISU is just super close. Now that I think about it, I probably should have gone to another school. I love ISU a lot, but there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of potential that I never even thought about, honestly. So right now, I was going into ISU thinking about studying just politics. I was talking to an advisor and I was saying, I'm so interested in politics. I'm so interested in religion. I'm very interested in society in general, right? I'm very interested in a lot of different subjects, like psychology too. That was another thing I wanted to study. And so I was like, what do I do?
Right.
And, they said they were the political science advisor, and they said, political science is a great field, but at the same time, it looks like you're coming into college with about 30 or 40 credits. I was dual enrolled in a lot of high school credits and stuff. So they said, why don't you just major in a bunch of things that you're interested in, because it looks like you have room for your schedule. So I declared 3 majors. I'm a major in political science. I'm also a major in philosophy, and I'm also getting a major in sociology. And I also just recently declared a minor in Gender Sexuality Studies too.
Whoa, bro.
Mm-hmm.
You be working.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't make up my mind, and so I just decided to do it all. Like
Right.
I said, I really wish I could study psychology too, but I just don't have enough room to do that if I want to graduate in 4 years. So lots of different studies and lots of different topics, but it's just stuff that I'm very fascinated in. So
That's good, though. But in the fact that you're, like, educating yourself, not just one thing, but so many, that gives you so much more knowledge and adaptability in so many different things.
yeah, for sure. I think that I really like diving deep into a specific study. I think that people that do that, I think it's very respectable to do.
Right.
But at the same time, I just wasn't able to make up my mind because there's just so much things that interest me.
Right.
And so, I mean, it wasn't very hard at first, but now that I'm in my third year and we're into 400 level classes, getting to upper division credits,
Right.
starting to actually dive really deep into the studying all 3 of those and the gender and sexuality studies, it's pretty tough.
Dude, it sounds tough, man.
It is pretty tough, but I really enjoy it.
Is this your second, third year?
This is my third year here, yep. And then next year's my last year. I'm just planning on graduating in 4 years, so.
Wow, dude, that's actually be really sweet. And what you're going to get out of all this is going to be absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
On top of it all.
Yeah, I plan on, I'll be applying for law school here at the end of the summer. Right now I'm studying for the LSAT. It's the pre-law test.
Oh, right.
Mm-hmm. So planning on going into law school later, so.
Do you have any idea where you want to go? Have you looked anywhere?
Yeah, I'm looking at Ivy League schools, to be honest with you. It just kind of depends on what I score on this LSAT. My GPA is pretty good, so just as long as I score pretty good on the LSAT, Yale's always been my first choice.
Heck yeah, bro.
Yeah, I really like Yale. I really like Harvard, but it just kind of depends. I plan on applying for a bunch of different schools, and we'll see what happens. But.
Right. So, like, what is the goal? What is the end result? What do you want to do inside of politics and all this?
Yeah. So when I get out of law school, I plan on studying, practicing law for a little bit. I'm not sure if I'm going to go into like a private field or more of a public field. But I definitely plan on running for office. I want to be a politician. That's always kind of been my dream job. I'm either looking at running as like a representative in Congress. I don't think the presidency interests me as much, especially with the presidential politics as it is right now. It's pretty dirty stuff. But I think that being in like the House of Representatives or maybe even being in the Senate as like kind of an end goal dream job for me is probably something that I want to pursue. So.
That would be wild, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wish you luck, man. And you're putting in the work. Definitely that study time.
You don't need luck.
You don't. Yeah.
It's all about dedication, man.
It is 100%. It's what you put in the work and
100%.
time. Yep.
You gotta put in 10 times more than anybody else and more.
Yes.
And it's not because you want to it's not because you want to one up everybody. It's simply because you want to be the best you.
Yes, you can. That's exactly what we preach on the show, bro. It's like understanding that you may be imperfect, but those imperfections that you are aware of, work every day to fix those, increase those, be the best human being you can on
100%.
every day. You know,
I look at different stories. Like Michael Jordan is one of my kind of my role models in a way. I mean, he was the best in the world at playing basketball for a while. I'm not even a sports fan, but Michael Jordan's dedication is something that I really aspire to. I mean, he was the best in the world, and when he didn't win, he wasn't upset because other people were beating him. It was just simply that he wasn't fulfilling his own potential.
Exactly.
And I mean, it's a race against yourself, not against anybody else.
Yeah, I agree. It's like, I know when I finish an episode and I know it's not like the best I want to be, I'll go upstairs and sit and talk about my fiance and my family, be like, you know, like it's good, like it's decent. I'm like, I know, but I can do better. Like 100%. It can be better. I can act better, think faster, you know, things like that.
That's how you get better at anything.
Increase your own self thing. So before we dive right into all this, though, I gotta talk about these crazy pants, bro. Like, what's up with all these crazy pants? Why are you doing it?
See, everybody asks. A lot of people ask me that question, and I want to say it's like a really deep philosophical, sociological statement. It's like,
I'm gonna show these pants while you're talking. Go ahead.
All right, these ones are donut pants. I really like these pants. Yeah, so I have like 30 or 40 pairs of these, and I wear a different pair every day. And like I said, I want to be like, oh, I'm doing it as a personal statement against the world, but it's really not that deep, to be honest with you. I think I got a pair when I was like in middle school, and I just really liked wearing them, and so I just kept doing it. And then one time I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna stop wearing boring pants because, you know, why not?
Right.
But at this point, I mean, I've going through high school and going through like peer pressure and stuff, and I still wear them. It's like I think the reason that I do it is honestly, we only live once. I know that's an overrated state, or everybody says it. Everybody says YOLO, right? But like, I just don't really care about what people think about me necessarily. I mean, I love constructive criticism, but somebody making fun of my pants or somebody saying like, why do you wear those pants? Like, I get called gay all the time. Everybody thinks that.
Gosh, man.
I mean, it happens, but at the same time, I don't really care because I make fun of people that wear normal pants.
There you go, bro. See, I need to get me a pair, bro.
No offense, man. No offense. But people who make fun of me for my pants, I just automatically turn it and make fun of them.
No, I absolutely love it. Putting yourself out there and like doing that, being that difference. I love it. Like, I absolutely love it because I've known you. Well, no, we've been friends on Facebook. You know, we worked together at one point in time, but that was years ago.
Yeah,
you were still wearing the pants, dude.
Yeah,
all the way to now.
Sadly,
so it's
I couldn't wear them at work, which is sad. But I wear them every day, all day outside of work. Yeah. And I mean, I love it. I don't ever plan on changing.
Oh, I love it, dude. I'm walking across campus. I could see you across the quad. You know, like there's John.
That's how everybody knows me. They say, "Oh, the person with the pants." But
yeah. I love it, dude. I love it. And
Thanks,
I love that you're going against the grain, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, thanks, man.
So to dive right into this, like I said, I want to have you on because I wanted somebody at least knew of the field and knew of politics and things like that before like I got somebody on that didn't but has a lot of opinions, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you do too, but before we dive into it, I just want to kind of discuss a little bit of like this is black and white in politics.
Sure.
You know, one thing as a consumer and trying to get more and more into politics, trying to understand like what affects what and why we should get involved and things like that is it's always black and white. You know, it's like it's this way or this way. And to me, it's always like, why do I have to, you know, and specifically I'm talking about Democrats and Republicans.
Sure.
And so to me, I'm like, you know, I want to get involved. I want to vote. I want to choose, you know, who I want to be my president. And I love kind of being middle grounded because I get to choose. And people are always like, you know, why would you choose this person? Why would you choose that person? Well, like in 2016 election alone, I think Trump got 62 million total votes and Hillary got 65 million, even though Trump won. But that tells you that, you know, it's always like the Democrats are wrong. And I'm like, in my mind, that's 62 million people that you're saying are wrong. Like, and the other side, the Republican, that's 65 or, you know, whatever it may be. And I'm like, how could millions of people be wrong? So like, why do I have to pick a side? So is there like a benefit? Basically, am I asking you to be a Republican or a Democrat? Like, do you have to be a part of a party? Do you have to like choose a side? Like, why is it so much black and white, you know?
Sure. So I want to address the first thing that you said, like actually getting somebody on here that kind of knows about politics, that studied politics. And I think it relates very well with your question is that politics and philosophy specifically, they're not black and white fields. They're completely different from a lot of different studies. I have a friend, he's a computer science major, and he was in one of my political science classes, and he saw one of the tests. Like most of the tests are take home, they're essays, they're long answer. There's not a right or a wrong. There's not a black or a white. There's not a box that you can circle, right?
Right.
It's all essays. He says, how is this even a field? Like, there's not a right or a wrong answer. You can't. It's not a black or a white thing.
Right.
So having somebody that knows more about politics, I don't want to say more about politics because everybody knows about politics. It's a social issue. It affects everybody. And having somebody like me specifically, I think that studying the field just kind of makes you realize how much you don't actually know.
Right.
Somebody who thinks that they know a lot about politics probably doesn't know very much, just because there's so much affecting us. Politics is such a broad thing. And those who claim to know, including me, somebody who studies politics, I don't really know much more than anybody else. It's a very complicated thing. So back to your question, the black and white, the polarization, especially in the United States. We don't necessarily see this in other like liberal democracies, especially with like a parliamentary system where you have multiple parties, 30, 40 parties. But in the United States, right, we have two main parties, the Republicans and Democrats. There's tons of people who are independents, but how many independents are represented in Congress? How many independents have actually been elected? So like you said, we have Hillary Clinton, who got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. I think you said about 65 million, somewhere right around there. So we have 65 million people who voted for another person who's not in office, and they don't feel like they're being represented.
Right. Exactly.
So it's a hard thing. I feel like I said, I'm not gonna be able to give you a lot of answers. I think that I think this podcast is gonna be successful for your viewers and for you if this conversation can confuse you more than it can give you answers.
Well, good.
There's a lot of different factors in this political polarization or the black and white, and I think a lot of it has to do with human nature. We like to see things as one way or another, whether it's male or female, guy or girl, black, white, Republican, Democrat. It's just a very simplistic thing to put things into categories. And it can definitely be a problem, especially within the political field, because there's so many people that feel unrepresented by either the Republican Party or the Democratic Party.
Right. Okay, so I love that because you already answered the biggest questions, like that black and white is, saying all that, it makes total sense, but it doesn't, because you're right. Like that's what I'm trying to say is I feel like things are so complex that I hate that we have to choose this or that way. And I'm like, and I hear people talking about this is going to help me, but I'm like, okay, well, the other person will help them. So it's like, yeah, you're only choosing your way because it might benefit you, but not someone else. And I'm always trying to pull myself out of the situation is, the whole, idea of Obamacare, it's like the idea that if I paid a little bit more in tax, it would suck. But if I could help and be a part of giving millions more health insurance, then I'm okay with that. But a lot of people, my fucking insurance went up and they don't want that. And they get very upset, Right.
And I think that's one of the main critical flaws of a two-party system is you have one side that's trying to benefit their half or their voters, especially in a democracy, right? You're trying to give as much as you can to your voters. You're trying to make your voters happy so that they vote for you. And a part of that can be demonizing the other side, right? By saying that the other side doesn't want this for you, right?
Right, exactly.
And so that's why I think we see such a big split in demographics between Republicans and Democrats is we have a certain, like minority voters especially, they tend to be more liberal, or older white voters, they tend to be more Republican. It's typically because Republicans are trying to expand Social Security or they're trying to expand programs for older white folks, right? But we have liberals who are trying to do things for especially minorities, right? So they're just trying to pander to their sides of the voters, and people feel like if a Republican gets nominated, I'm not going to feel represented. If a Democrat gets nominated, I'm not going to feel represented, right? And so I think that's one of the main flaws with the two-party system is we have a person who, like, let's say Donald Trump, he's in the office, he's trying to appease his base so that they'll get out and vote for him this year. But what about the people that aren't being affected by his policies, right? I think that that's one of the main flaws of the two-party system that's happening in the United States, like you were saying. Right.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And so, like, when you're running for president, is there, like, a benefit? Is it because that there's already been this built of this base being built upon that, you have to be Republican or Democrat to make it into office, and that's why someone kind of chooses Democrat, Republican? Why couldn't, someone go through the system or try to become president that has beliefs that could, in particular, help everybody rather than just one side?
Yeah. So if I could have voted in 2016, I probably would have voted for Gary Johnson, just because I think a lot of people were in that same boat. They were saying, I don't like Donald Trump, I don't like Hillary Clinton. And a lot of people were either forced to vote for Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton because they're the best of. Right.
Exactly.
And it's not necessarily like a precedent thing where somebody has to run as a Democrat or Republican. It's just simply the way that our system is laid out. So in a presidential race specifically, you have to win 270 electoral votes in the electoral college
Right.
to win the presidency. And if you get less than that, you don't win. And so that's why I think, let's see, 270 is half of the amount of electoral points that you can get. And
Right.
so if other people start getting electoral points, then their candidate isn't going to win. And so it's a two-person race type thing.
Right.
That's why, like, I think that Donald Trump in 2016, he said that if he didn't win the nomination, that he would run as an independent candidate. And essentially what that does is if somebody runs as an independent candidate, or if somebody runs as like a Green Party candidate or a Communist Party candidate or a Libertarian candidate or an independent candidate, is you take away the votes from either the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, and you're taking away the electoral votes from one of those two parties. And so they won't be able to get to that 270 vote threshold, but the other party can.
Right.
And so if somebody like Bernie Sanders, who is technically considered an independent, who doesn't, he still caucuses and votes with the Democrats, but he's technically not a Democrat. If he ran as an independent against the Democratic candidate, let's say Joe Biden this year, he would take away votes from Joe Biden. And because we have this winner-take-all system, Donald Trump would be the benefactor here if Bernie Sanders ran as an independent candidate.
Right.
And so it's more of a systematic thing on why we have a two-party system in the United States rather than more of like a precedent thing, if that makes sense.
So, like, don't you think that's kind of all BS when it comes to that? Like, because I feel like people are choosing a side of a party because, like you said, it will benefit them in the long run because those people are already there. And you're like, oh, I'm Democrat. And then you'll get a portion of those Democrats rather than being like, I'm independent, where you have such a smaller pool. So do you think that we should maybe move to something like a popular vote system rather than just be like a just Republican Democrat kind of thing, or like, I don't know.
It's very hard to say. There's been tons of debates on whether or not we should have a big systemic overhaul of our system right now. I mean, we're pretty much one of the only liberal democracies that has this winner-take-all electoral college system. Like I said, in parliamentary systems like the UK, we have tons of different parties, right? So you have the social conservatives, you have the liberal Democrats. I mean, you have tons of different factions and different parties, and these people get elected to parliament. And essentially, you have to have 50% of the vote in parliament to pass a law in parliament.
Right.
And so typically, like, the social conservatives are the majority in the parliament right now in the UK, but they don't have over that 50% threshold to actually sign things into law. And so what they have to do is they have to form coalitions to form a government to get over that 50% percent threshold. So we have multiple different candidates from multiple different parties that represent different people and different populations in the population, which is a fantastic thing. And they all have to come together to compromise on a piece of legislation that over 50% of the people in that parliament agree with. That's not necessarily the case in the United States, right? We have the Republicans, we have the Democrats.
Right.
And it seems like there's no compromise here. Whoever has the majority over 50% in the House or in the Senate, they get their way. There's no compromising with the other side. If you have a majority, that's how it's going to be. So the question, do I think that we should move to something like a national popular vote rather than what we have now? I'm not sure. It's very hard to say. I think that it would have significant impact, and I don't know whether or not it's good or bad. Here's the thing. Here's what I'm scared about. If we do like a national popular vote, it kind of depends on how we do it. So if we were to say that, like, let's say there's 30 candidates running, right? We have like Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump. We have all of the main popular ones, and then we have a whole bunch of other different ones, right? I think you said that you watched the Democratic debates, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, there's tons of Democratic. There was like 22 or 23 Democratic candidates at the beginning of this race. Let's say that they were all running for president, and we had tons of different Republicans. Sorry,
You're good.
we had tons of different Republicans running. So you have 30, 40 different candidates. So how are we going to decide which one wins? Is it going to be the person who gets the most votes? That could mean that a candidate could get elected with 5 or 6% of the vote.
That's also true. Correct.
That would be bad.
Right.
So we might be able to do like a runoff situation where like the top 2 or top 3 get left at the end of the vote, and then people vote on them. It's hard to say whether or not that would be a better system.
Right.
This is the problem with politics, I think, is it's such a complex issue that, I mean, we have 300 million people in the United States. Try and get all of them to get along. It just doesn't work very well.
Exactly.
So what system is going to grant the most representation to the most amount of people? And there's not a clear answer. I think that with the direct vote, there would need to be a lot of work on how it's actually going to happen compared to the electoral college that we have now. But I think it has some potential.
Right.
There's lots of different studies.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Because I'm thinking this conversation and this idea and this question about, is it a popular vote? Because I'm talking to somebody and they're Democrat and we're just like discussing a little bit of politics, and they make the sentence to me that really gets me thinking about this is, I'm not even going to go vote. And I said, why?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you should go vote. Like, you should vote. Like, at the very least. Well, it doesn't matter. Idaho's a red state. Mm-hmm. And it has been since like 1901, like over 100 years, right? Mm-hmm. And so, like, why should I go vote, especially when my vote doesn't count because it's not popular? I'm not being represented.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's definitely a flaw with the electoral college system because, I mean, we have 3 electoral votes in Idaho. And like you said, Idaho is mainly going to go Republican. It's for sure going to go Republican, right? And so all 3 of those electoral votes are going to go towards the Republican nominee. Right. And so the other half of the population who votes for a Democratic candidate, those votes are literally thrown away. They're wasted. They don't mean anything. They just go into the national popular vote, but they don't do anything. They don't help decide the president.
Right.
And so this winner-take-all system, like you said, it definitely makes a lot of people feel like their voices aren't being heard. And that's what I hear a lot, too, is people say, I'm not going to go out and vote just because my vote doesn't matter. Right. The United States has one of the lowest voter turnouts in almost any liberal democracy in the whole entire world. Yet we pride ourselves in our democratic ideals. But it seems that only 1/4 of the population is actually deciding who the leaders are. And I don't know about you, Gage, but that doesn't sound very democratic.
Yeah, no, it does not at all. So, like, another question is, too, like, with this voting thing and talking about this voting is, getting more people to go and vote. And I hear both sides. Before you came on, I'm trying to talk to, a lot of my family's Republican, a lot of friends are Democrat, just kind of, like I said, I'm very mutual trying to make my decision because although I may not pick a party, but I am going to vote for president regardless. And so when we're talking about all these politics, isn't there an easier way for us to vote? I'm thinking in my mind, like, okay, so we only had, I think, 120 million out of, like you said, 350 million people go vote. And I think a lot of that is a lot of the younger base, which we've been talking about.
Well, that's in a presidential election, too.
Presidential, yeah.
And those typically have higher turnout rates. And
right.
So that's highball. But anyways.
Yeah. So, but if we go vote or even like, okay, yeah, so president or anything else, we have this very complicated system, which to me feels really outdated of having to physically go out of your home all the way, which sounds stupid, but regardless, like there's a lot of people that don't do that, to be able to go out of their home, go wait in lines for hours, fill out their vote, and then come home. A lot of people are like, let alone, do I not care about politics? Do I not, like it or get involved? Or it's just like, Idaho's already a red state. All those thoughts going through their head, and let alone the process of going to vote. Don't you think moving to something like a digital vote or something like that where it's like, I think of like Bengal Web when we have politics here on campus. You just log into Bengal Web, right on your right side. It says, vote for who you want to be our student president.
Yeah.
It's a button, hit submit, you're done.
Once again, this is probably going to confuse you because I just don't think it's that easy. There's a lot of different reasons why I think people don't participate in the political process. Some just might not like government in general. Some people might not think that they have their best interests in mind. Some people might not think that their vote matters. I mean, we live in like you said, 300 million people in the United States. What's one vote going to do, right? That's what I hear a lot. Or a lot of people just say that they don't feel represented by politicians. And so I don't know if easier voter registration or maybe even automatic registration when you file for like a driver's license when you're 18 or whatever, I don't know if that's going to fix voter turnout in our country. I think overall it's just kind of a systemic people feel unaffected by politics in a certain way. And like we were talking about before the camera started rolling, is politics really affects everybody and everything. It affects everybody in different ways that they don't even realize. Like this microphone is regulated by the United States government. These lights are on. Right. It's regulated by the state. There's certain housing laws that are regulated by the state. The computer that people or the phone that the people are watching this podcast on, it's all regulated by the government to have certain different functions to protect the population.
Right.
Even the mattress that you woke up on today is regulated by the government. There's tons of government regulations, and it affects everybody. Hundreds, if not thousands of times a day that people don't even realize it. And if you're not voting, you're not deciding this trajectory of your life, and it's kind of scary. So I think that increasing voter turnout is a very important question. but at the same time, it's also very hard to figure out how to get more people involved.
Right.
If we make the registration process easier, I think it might help. But at the same
Right.
time, I think people need to understand that politics doesn't just affect a certain population. I think everybody needs to realize that it affects everybody.
It affects everybody overall. So just to kind of lead away from all that in the Republican and Democratic Party, who did you choose for your party?
Yeah, so I just recently registered as a Democrat, and in this previous presidential primary, I voted for Bernie Sanders in Idaho.
Awesome. Awesome. So that leads to my next question. Why would you endorse Bernie Sanders? What appeals to you about him?
So this is actually this is a great transition, because I think for a majority of people that sort of pay attention to politics, like, you don't have to be a political junkie to understand that a lot of politicians aren't necessarily concerned about every single person in the United States, right?
Right.
We don't have people like me and you in the federal government that are representing interests like us.
Right.
There's not college students sitting there telling our politicians to write bills to try and make housing affordable, to try and make schooling affordable. There's no homeless people in the federal government saying advocating for affordable housing. There's just not people like that in our federal government. A majority of people who represent us are millionaires and billionaires.
Right.
So for me, one of the most important issues that is facing us, and why I voted for Bernie Sanders, is because I think he's the only candidate that understands and starts to address problems of economic inequality in our country. I mean, we have millionaires and billionaires who donate millions to our politicians to write legislation for them, when they're not legislating for people who are actually voting for them. They're not legislating for me. They're not legislating for you. They're not legislating for your viewers. They're only legislating for the people that have the money. And I think that's probably one of the main issues that needs to be addressed if we're going to tackle anything that we're talking about, including voter registration or voter turnout, is our politicians need to actually start representing us rather than the interests of the few.
Right. So do you think Bernie's more kind of representing the whole rather than a specific like millionaires, billionaires type of thing?
Yeah, the policies that he advocates for, I think, really show that. I think one of the main disastrous policies, well, it's not necessarily a policy, but it was a Supreme Court decision in our lifetimes, was Citizens United. Citizens United was a Supreme Court case which essentially allows corporations to donate any amount of money to political candidates that they want in the name of freedom of speech. When individuals like me or you can only donate up to $2,800 to political candidates.
Right.
I can only donate up to $2,800, but corporations can donate almost an unlimited amount of money to political candidates that they want to. And I think that sets a dangerous precedent for...
Very much so, yeah.
Yes, especially with the amount of money that politicians have to spend today to get elected, especially in presidential races. They need campaign contributions. And if that means getting donations from the fossil fuel industries or the pharmaceuticals, which are essentially bribes, then a lot of candidates will do it just to get elected, right?
Right.
And Bernie Sanders is the only person in the Democratic race as of now. Elizabeth Warren used to do the same, but he's the only presidential candidate in the race right now who has not accepted money from corporations, campaign contributions from corporations or super PACs. And I think that that clean record is a very important thing for a political candidate to have, no matter whether you're Republican or you're Democrat.
Right. So since we're talking about this like Bernie Sanders thing, a lot of things I hear about is Bernie Sanders is a socialist. Do you believe that someone could have socialist tendencies but not be overall socialist? Like in essence, like what we're doing now with the $1,200 check, we're sending everybody out $1,200 checks, which is kind of socialist in a tendency of itself, but people accept it. But when it's Bernie trying to do it for, things that are really important, like, healthcare and school and all that kind of stuff, like, what do you think about all that?
See, right there, Gage, that's the black and white.
Right.
That's exactly what it is you have to pin a label on somebody. You say that, oh, this person's a socialist or this person's a capitalist. It's all a dichotomy. It's black and white. This person's this person's that. But in all reality, I mean, what is a socialist? There's tons of different definitions of what socialism is. Like if we're talking about a Karl Marx type socialism, that's more of a communist type, where there's an abolishment of private property, where the government owns a means of production. That's technically considered socialism. Or are we talking about a socialism where everybody's in it together, more of an egalitarian, I'm in it for you, you're in it for me. Let's all pitch in a little bit of money so that we can get basic necessities like housing, school, healthcare, things like that. So yes, the label of socialism does get pinned on Bernie Sanders. He considers himself a democratic socialist because typically socialism is a dirty word in American politics. Usually people, when they think of socialism, they think of Fidel Castro, they think of Lenin, they think of the USSR, which is bad. Bernie Sanders wants to get away from that. But he considers himself a democratic socialist. And how he kind of defends this democratic socialist label is he said, I want to get away from the labels, like what we were talking about, because Bernie Sanders, he wants to guarantee healthcare, like you were talking about. He wants to guarantee higher education. He wants to guarantee a bunch of different things that a lot of people don't agree with. But he considers these things a human right, just like how a lot of people consider K through 12 education as a human right.
Right. Exactly.
The public pitches in a certain amount of money in taxes to pay for this K through 12 education. But Bernie Sanders realizes that, or he thinks that healthcare is a right like this, that higher education is a right like this, that affordable housing is a right like this. And so is he a socialist in the sense? I think he's a socialist in the sense that everybody's a socialist. I think there's socialist tendencies for everything, but I don't really think that labels are necessarily matter that much.
Right, I agree. So like as an American or even as a consumer of politics, how do you think we can try to get away from this black and white and stop pinning it on it's the Republicans' fault, it's the Democrats' fault? Every headline I read from Fox News to Business Insider, whatever it may be, it's always this group of people is doing this or this group of people is doing that. These people are wrong. How can we pull away from this rather than trying to label everybody as this one thing and trying to make politics black and white? I feel like that's what I'm trying to talk about, this black and white thing too, is I feel like I'm only fed this or that decision. I don't have anything else. Like I have to choose this or that. I can't analyze either my family wants me to be Republican or they want me to be Democrat for this and that reason because they believe these beliefs. Well, I believe in some of those. I do, but I also believe in a lot of this as well. Yeah.
I think a lot of it has to do with the human condition and our tendencies towards confirmation bias. Typically we seek out information that confirms our own viewpoints already, which is what I really appreciate about your podcast in general, is just there's a lack of dialogue. And I think that democracy very much so relies on dialogues like this. I'm sure that many of your viewers are pretty mad at me because I support Bernie Sanders, right?
I don't know.
There's definitely some people out there that are like, you have this Bernie Sanders socialist communist on your podcast. And it's like, I support Bernie Sanders, but at the same time, I'm more than happy to talk to anybody about my viewpoints because that's exactly what our democracy relies on.
Right.
There's never been a democracy without social dialogue until now.
Right.
We have things like social media where you follow the pages that you agree with, and the only information that you're exposed to is information that will confirm your viewpoints.
Right.
That's the problem with cable news nowadays. Is we don't have any unbiased sources except for C-SPAN. And when's the last time you watched C-SPAN?
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, exactly. It's not interesting for people to watch things that don't confirm their own viewpoints. They want to feel like they're superior. They want to feel like the other side is demonic and they're trying to destroy the country. It's playing into human nature. And I mean, that's what cable news networks are doing. That's what social media is doing. And it's very dangerous for a democracy like ours. But actually having a dialogue, especially like educational dialogue, like at school, getting educated about certain issues, having podcasts, talking about issues, even if you don't know anything about politics, at least trying to understand what each other is trying to say.
Right.
It's a very important first step, I think.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%. I just hate that you get pushed one side or the other. If you don't believe in that, you do believe in that. And like you said, like we only follow the things that will confirm our viewpoint. That's a really good way to put that because I'm thinking about a lot of the news. Like I said, I haven't really identified as I've only really, really dove into politics, like watching the news, watching all the debates, things like that until recently. And I'm reading all these news articles and I'm telling my mom, which is a Republican, and I'm telling her about these news articles that I'm reading and stuff. And well, what'd you get that information off of? And I was like, oh, this and this and this. Those are all Democratic things. I'm like, oh my God, am I a Democrat? Like, like you have to understand that. It made me think though, when I Googled a piece of information, I don't get Fox News. I don't get all these things. And so it's kind of weird how you know, like you said, all social media, all these internet things will tune to what it thinks I am and only give me those news sources. So now I'm like, I don't want that. Now I have to Google whatever the topic is, Fox News, so I can see what the other side is saying about it. You know?
See, this is the scary part about modern technology in general. I mean, I love technology. I think everybody should embrace technology, but there's also some certain aspects that we need to talk about. Like I said, one of my best friends is a computer scientist, and he understands things like algorithms, like YouTube algorithms, right? Because I was watching a lot of your podcasts started showing up on my YouTube algorithm, right? So actually studying what videos are pulling up is very important for people framing their opinions, right? When I start watching liberal shows on YouTube, literally the only things that come up are going to be the liberal viewpoints. So how these computers are programmed to actually pull up different news sites or different things recommended for you to watch, this is having a major impact on public opinion. And it's something that both computer scientists and political scientists need to be very concerned about, and also watching to be, I mean, we're heading into another civil war, and I hate to say it, because liberals and Democrats live in different worlds. That's just how it is. I mean, liberals and Democrats literally live in different worlds. They see the world completely differently. There's been tons of studies that show, there's even studies that suggest that they live different lifestyles at this point. Liberals tend to have messier rooms. They tend to have more creativity or artistic creativity. They tend to try new things more. Conservatives tend to be typically more strictly disciplined. They tend to live by a regimented, habitual lifestyle. They tend to be to make more money, right? There's different lifestyles now, and I think it's all being caused and perpetrated by this social media, these algorithms that are coming, and this confirmation bias, like what we were talking about.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It sucks that you have to force yourself to learn, because you're right. You're like you said, it's like confusing, but it makes sense. But if you try to like understand the bigger picture,
it's way more complicated.
Yeah,
and two college students sitting down in Pocatello, Idaho, aren't going to be able to figure it out.
100%.
But we can figure out what the best we can do for ourselves.
Exactly. And so like trying to actually go out there and find both sides of articles. You know, like if my mom never said something like that, I would have never even known, or even talking to you about this, about how all, you know, like you said, the algorithms, you know, I played with YouTube algorithms since I was 12 years old making gaming videos, you know, like it's always debating on what you watch is what you get, you know, or you'll get similar types of videos. And now understanding that Google's doing the same thing, like when I'm just trying to Google, you know, the stimulus bill or whatever may be happening, and I'm like Googling it, all I get is things that they think that I might like, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm being one-sided. Because all these articles are like, again, back to this black and white system that I just hate, of Republicans are doing this and Democrats are holding it up. And I'm talking to my family, Democrats are holding this up, they're doing this, they're doing that. It's so like black and white. And I'm reading all these articles, come to find out that, you know, Democrats with the stimulus bill in particular are thinking about, they didn't want to give like give the Trump administration the power to give all these companies and things like literally billions of dollars for without any kind of guidelines. But my family Republican views, all they say is all they're consuming is this, they're wrong and Democrats are wrong because they just don't want to help. They don't want to help anybody. And I'm like, how could you even say that?
Sure.
Like,
see, this is the scary part too, is I do watch Fox News just because I like to see what people are watching. Like my parents watch Fox News. My almost all the Republicans in my life just consume Fox News on the day, right?
Oh yeah.
And I just I'm curious on what conservatives are consuming. I mean, don't get me wrong. I still consume MSNBC. I consume CNN. I watch it with a very careful eye.
Right.
But I like to see what is happening on Fox News. And typically the Democrats that they put on their show to give the Democratic point of view, it's like, this person's an idiot. It's like, this is not what I believe. This is not even close to what I believe. I mean, I consider myself a Democrat, and this is not even close to what I believe. This person's an idiot, right?
Right.
So they have people, MSNBC does the exact same thing. They bring Donald Trump supporters on who are complete idiots, who don't represent a majority of this constituency, and it's very concerning. We need to understand each other's point of views and each other's perspectives, and understand that Republicans don't want to see this country burn. Democrats also don't want to see this country burn.
Exactly.
We're all working towards the same goal, in that we want to see our country succeed. We want our children to have a better future than us. We're all working towards the same goal, but it's this demonizing of the other side that's very dangerous.
Exactly. Yeah, like I hate this black and white system, because again, not only these things like we're getting fed whatever the algorithm feeding us, but the content itself. You know, my mom's talking about how Bernie went on to some Republican, I think it was Fox News, but don't quote me on that, but went on someone and they're like, they just ripped him apart. And I'm like, Mom, you got to understand. Okay, just as an interview, when I like writing my questions and things like that, like knowing your guests ahead of time, and plus when you have a team of 30, 40 people coming up with questions, you're specifically trying to ask questions and tone things in the answers that you want. So when they bring someone on to Fox News, I'm sure they're asking questions that they know they can't answer, or at least will stumble on, or won't be appealing to their audience because it'll just benefit them in the long run, rather than having a genuine, calm discussion like a podcast. You know,
it also kind of depends too, because I watched all of those town halls that Bernie Sanders had on Fox News too. The funny thing is that me and my parents are very conservative. Well, I don't know if they're very conservative, but they're conservative. So I'm watching it, they're watching it. At the end, I'm just like, man, Bernie Sanders did so good. Like, he killed him. And my parents are like, what? Right? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We live in completely different worlds. But the thing is that, I mean, Republicans and Democrats, we tend to value different things. When Bernie Sanders says that he wants to make Medicare for all, right? He wants to make healthcare affordable. Conservatives, they look at that with disdain, right? They think that it's not possible, that the price tag's too big, whatever goes through their mind whenever they see that, or whatever goes through my mind when I see it. It's completely different things.
Right,
and
exactly.
So that's the weird thing. And I think did you ever do debate and speech in high school?
I did.
Yeah. So, I mean, I love debate and speech. I volunteer with the high schools here still, actually. I love
awesome.
Speech and debate. It's the best. There was one time where I was debating, I think it was about universal basic income, which has been becoming a big thing now with this whole coronavirus and that stimulus package,
right.
Sending everybody a certain check, right? There's one person to my right, there's one person to my left that's judging this debate that I'm having with this person about universal basic income. There's one person that's on my right that adamantly disagrees with what I'm saying. Another person on my left that is very much agrees with what I'm saying, right? These two people heard the exact same conversation. One person,
that's true.
One person does not agree with me. One person very much agrees with me. Isn't that weird?
That is weird how you perceive it. You're hearing it and you're listening it in the way that you want to hear and listen to it.
100%.
You know?
And they heard the exact same conversation. One person voted for me. One person voted for the other person. It's crazy.
That is kind of crazy. It's just how we're built, how we consume our experiences, our cultures, our backgrounds, our economic status, etc. Like, you know.
And see, everybody doesn't think that it's them that's doing it when they're watching Fox News or they're watching the certain news that they consume. They think that, I'm looking at this with objective eyes. I'm not bringing any of my biases in. But we all have the same monkey brain. We all have the same tendencies. We all do the same thing. It affects every single one of us, even if you don't think it does.
Yeah, I agree. So moving away and still kind of talking about this black white, but moving into a conversation about our president, Donald Trump, you know, and I only ask this in the essence that, you know, this is going to be weird for you, but, you know, I said this in front of my family and I swear they like lost their minds. And I said that if Bernie Sanders, because I would personally, as of now, would vote for Bernie Sanders as well. The issue is, as I said, that if Joe Biden didn't win, I would probably vote for Trump. And I said that to a couple different people, and the reactions are literally...
Wait, you said if Bernie Sanders doesn't win, you'll vote for Trump? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and people's minds are fucking gone. So in my mind, in my opinion, like I just don't like Joe Biden less than I do like Trump.
Sure.
You know, but I love Bernie Sanders. And people lose their shit. Yeah. Like, they are just like... What the fuck? Like, other people are like, you dumb, like, why would you vote for Trump, you fucking crazy motherfucker? Other people are like, why would you even vote for Bernie or Biden? Like, that got Trump's all the way. Like, and I'm just like, bro, like, this is just how I consume, because in my mind I'm trying to look at these three independent people rather than two Democrats and Republican. I'm trying to see these three independents and trying to vote, and so people lose their minds. But with all that being said, I wanted to kind of take that into Trump and ask you about Trump from your point of view. What, and if you can even think of or know any, what are some things you do like and don't like about Trump? This will help me build.
I think you were going to ask me that.
Yeah.
So what are some things I do like and I don't like about
Yes.
Trump? So, okay, first of all, I want to say you're not alone when you say that if Bernie Sanders doesn't win, that you're going to vote for Donald Trump. It's such a weird dichotomy that's like everybody thinks that Bernie Sanders is this really radical left person. And it's like, how are you going to go from one end of the spectrum and vote for the other? But I swear you're not alone. People like we were saying, some people don't feel like their politicians represent them, and a lot of people feel that with Joe Biden. A lot of people feel that with Bernie Sanders. A lot of people feel that with Donald Trump. So, I mean, you're not alone. So, some good things about Donald Trump, some bad things about Donald Trump. So, I know that you were gonna, I knew you were going to ask me about the good things about Donald Trump, and so I thought long and hard about it before I came on the show.
Good.
And
good.
I came up with one thing.
You can't. What do you like?
I think principally, I very much appreciate how Donald Trump wants to fulfill his promises to his base. And I think that's what a lot of Republicans really like him for, is I think that he will go out of his way, very much so, and betray political norms to fulfill his promises. I mean, I think we saw that with the wall.
Right.
He promised that, well, he said that Mexico would pay for it, but Mexico isn't going to pay for it. And so now he wanted to get the federal government to pay for it. And that big, long shutdown that we had a couple of years ago was simply because of border wall funding. He didn't want to sign any legislation unless it had funding for his border wall in it. And going to the extent that he did, where the federal government was shut down for a month, federal employees weren't getting their paychecks. I mean, he definitely risked a lot of people's lives. But at the same time, he wanted to fulfill his promises to his base, even if I disagree with those promises.
Right.
Now I get to move on to my favorite part on criticizing Donald Trump.
What you got?
Do I get off? Do I get off with just that one, or do I have to come up with something?
No, that's good, man. That's good. Seriously.
Since I only gave one, I'll give just one broad overarching criticism that I have of Donald Trump. And I think that what he's doing to democracy in general is kind of scary. You might agree or disagree with his policies. You might agree with the border wall. You might not. You might agree with his tax cuts. You might not. I adamantly disagree with a lot of what Donald Trump is doing. But I think in general and in principle, he's an undemocratic leader. I think that what he did with Ukraine, which is going to be another very controversial topic, a lot of people think that the phone call was perfect, or that there wasn't any quid pro quo with Ukraine.
Right.
Were you familiar with this whole impeachment? Yeah. Well, I think that what he'll do to stay in power is undemocratic, whether that be trying to get foreign influence in our elections with Russia. Like, he's not doing anything to stop Russia's influence in our election. That was a big thing in 2016.
Right.
There's bipartisan legislation in Congress right now to prevent voter fraud and voter registration problems, and also Russian interference in our election. It's sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk, and it's not happening. I think that's because his administration wants to stay in power, and he'll accept any outside influence in our election. That's what he tried to do with Ukraine when he tried to get investigations on his political rival. He literally asked China in a press conference. It wasn't in a press conference, but it was on live television. He asked China to influence our election. So he's welcoming outside influence in our election. And I think that the most important and the ultimate sanctuary for democracies is their election. And there has to be a free and a fair election without any foreign influence.
Right. Agreed.
And when he's inviting other people to come in and influence our elections, I think that's very undemocratic. Not to mention the things that he does to the press, criticizing. I don't get me wrong. I just sat here and criticized the press the whole time, but at the same time, calling them the enemy of the people. That's something that you would hear from, like the president of China, the president of an authoritarian regime, by saying that the press is the enemy of the people. The press is a way that a lot of people receive information about what their government is doing so that they can hold the people accountable. They're in no way the enemy of the people. And so I think that is one of my biggest criticisms for the Trump administration so far, is I'm just afraid of what he's doing to American democracy with our elections.
I got you. So, yeah, going off of that, what do you think America is facing? What are, like, I don't know, the top 2 or 3 issues do you think that America needs to face right now that maybe Trump isn't, or is doing, or does it do better, or, whatever?
See, that's probably the main reason why I dislike Trump. And I mean, I agree with you. I love Bernie Sanders, but I'll vote for Joe Biden. And the only reason I'll vote for Joe Biden is because I feel like he pays attention more to these issues, these top 3 issues, right? I think the main issue, like what we were talking about, is money in politics.
Right.
And buying legislation the fossil fuel companies owns our legislators. They write legislation for the fossil fuel companies. Same with the pharmaceutical industry.
Right.
The pharmaceutical industries, they give contributions to our politicians, and they're writing legislation for them as we speak. And they're not actually focusing on the needs of the American public, which is probably the most important issue, in my opinion. I mean, that affects every other issue.
Right.
How can our democracy function when our leaders are bribed by people who have the most money?
Mm-hmm. Do you think maybe like putting a cap on it or something would be better, like especially with financial donations and things like that?
Yeah, it's hard to say. There's tons of democracies that have publicly funded elections, and I've seen a couple of Democrats that support publicly funded elections, where you have, if you're going to run for president, you get this certain amount of money to spend, like let's say $1 billion coming from the public to fund your election, and you don't get any contributions from anybody, and that's the money that you use.
Right.
There's flaws with it. I think that people like me and you should be able to contribute and donate to candidates, because
Right.
I think that's an important part of our political process. At the same time, you need a lot of money nowadays to run political campaigns. I mean, Bloomberg just spent $500 million.
Yes. With the memes and
yeah.
that was an interesting campaign.
100%. I mean, he bought the airwaves, he bought the radio waves. He was able to get 15% of in national polls. He was able to get 15% just by running ads.
Yeah,
right?
that's crazy.
Yeah,
that's actually crazy.
That just kind of shows you how some people form their political views. Is they see an ad of a candidate, they think it represents them, and I mean that's the sad reality that we're facing.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of money to run democracy. So I don't know if publicly funded elections would actually solve the problem. But I think that the main thing that we can do right now is by overturning Citizens United, the Supreme Court case that I was talking about, where you don't allow companies to give an unlimited amount of money to political candidates.
That sounds crazy. Like, because then you could buy an election
100%.
easily.
100%. You just buy politicians and you say, write this piece of legislation that makes me more money. And then those people get richer and the people that don't get poor.
Yes.
That's why we're seeing the top 1% gaining more wealth than the bottom. But you asked me about 3, so I get 2 more.
Go ahead.
The second one is easily climate change. I think that climate change is 100% the biggest existential threat that we're facing as a species. It affects both Republicans, Democrats, Independents. It affects everybody. We're seeing rising sea levels. Cities will be underwater very soon. We're seeing species go out. We're seeing species go extinct. It's a very dangerous precedent that we're setting, and it doesn't seem like our world leaders really care at this point. And I'm concerned for the future of our children and our children's children, and even if they will have a future. This is our only home. And I mean, the science shows us, the evidence is very much overwhelming that climate change is being caused by human action. We need to take a step away from fossil fuels and non-renewable energy into solar, into wind, we need to be the first to actually start producing these rather than waiting for China or India to start producing them. And I think that having an administration that recognizes that even climate change is real is a very important thing. I mean, Donald Trump still thinks it's a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese.
Yes.
He put on Twitter that it's a hoax by the Chinese.
Yeah, I remember that tweet.
I mean,
I know. It's easy for people to agree, though, because they're like, well, the climate hasn't changed around here. But it's, I hate to bring this up, especially from a meme format, but it's something that's so true.
Memes are very important in politics.
They are. But it's like the fact that it's like, you need to go to college. And we're so like pressured by an older generation to go to college and, learn things. And then you come out of college, you're like, look, global warming's a real issue. They're like, that's fake. What are you talking? I'm like, what the? I literally I took 6 biology classes and I'm telling you, I've seen the science, the data, the research, the experiments. This shit's real.
Yeah. That is the biggest thing that frustrates me is I have been pressed to go to college, like you said, my whole entire life by my family, right? And now it seems like the conservative movement is kind of shifting away from education and saying that colleges are just kind of communist brainwashing institutions.
Yeah.
When I go to my biology class, and this is what I very much appreciate about higher education, this is why I completely agree with Bernie Sanders when he's advocating for that public education, higher public education is a human right. When I was in high school, I was dumb.
Yeah.
I literally thought that the world
1000%.
was flat. I thought that the world, I was a flat earther.
No.
Didn't believe in climate change. I had no, like I said, I was going to vote for Gary Johnson. He was the libertarian candidate. I was a conspiracy theorist. I mean, it was bad. That just shows you what public education gives us. But my first biology class, or I guess it was biology and geology, when I started learning about the realities of climate change, because public schools don't want to teach you that. Once you get into college, it's like, oh, hey, this thing that public education doesn't want to teach you because parents don't want you to
the
think
politics
that.
And that. Yeah.
Same with evolution. Same with everything else. Things that are scientific facts now that are politicized for some reason. People don't want to accept it.
Yeah.
The confirmation bias, like what we were talking about. But I learned a lot in college, man. And now that I've started to go away from my viewpoints, I used to consider myself a Republican. My family's Republican. And my parents asked me, they're like, why are you a Democrat now? You just went to a college. Like they could think that I'm being brainwashed, right?
Right.
And it's like, well, it just turns out that when I go to college, I learn things, and when you learn things, you change your viewpoints.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think that higher education is actually a very important thing. I watched your podcast with Sam Ward.
Yeah.
And I know that y'all might have some disagreements with when I say that higher education is a very vital thing. I don't think it's necessary for everybody, but at the same time, expanding your worldview and learning about things like this is very important
Yes,
to becoming a good person.
I agree 1,000%. I think college should be something that a lot of people should understand. And I like that note you kind of put about, this conversation is so heavy about is college, like, should it be paid by the people or whatever. But you were literally saying, or we already have the system where the public pays for, grades 1 through 12.
Yeah.
But like you said, there is such a separation because high school, like me and him mentioned on that same podcast, like how the hell did we graduate? Like you go to class, you turn in half done things.
That was the easiest thing I've ever done.
Yeah, literally, dude. But college is different.
100%.
It's really, it's like this conversation, like I talk about, is college worth it and things like that, because it's sometimes can be like a laundry list until you get into your field. When you like you said, like the first, or when I was saying on that podcast, the first 2 years is kind of like generals. You're kind of learning the basis, which is really good. But
it's important.
When you crone down to your craft, you're learning really, really important things from people that have been in the fields for 20, 30, 40 years and things like that, which I think could really benefit a lot of people.
Yes, and I think it makes you realize just how much you don't actually know.
Yes.
Studying political science, philosophy, sociology just made me realize, like with the film thing that you're doing, I know nothing about it.
I know.
But here's the thing, though, is that people who know nothing about it think that they know more than they actually do.
Right.
Like, there's been tons of studies that show that if you don't know anything about a subject, you think that you know way more.
Yeah.
But the thing is that once you actually start diving into it, like if I just jumped into one of the classes that you're taking right now, I'd be like, English? Right?
For real, though.
Because there's so much to learn about for each specific study. Mm-hmm. And the only way that you could possibly get to know it is by actually pursuing it into that field.
Yep, and learning that.
And so that's why I don't really pretend to know about things anymore.
I know. It's true, though. It's true. It's because sometimes someone will know a topic, and I try to train myself that too, because I'm bringing in so many guests from so many things that I don't know a lot of shit from, but I'm trying to learn. So I'm, always at the base, like with you. This is my first episode of politics. Yeah. I'm learning. This is my first time even having a conversation where it's not so heated, with my family, friends. It gets so hot so quick because, it's like one of those times when people like want to talk, but they don't want to listen. They just want to tell you.
100%.
This is, like I'll bring it up and I'm like, what do you, blah, 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 and I'm like, well, this is what I think. You're wrong. This is the right. It's just so much of aggressive rather than like a conversation, which is why I really love the podcast format, not just for myself, but like Joe Rogan and all those things where you get to have in-depth conversations between each other,
Yeah, 100%. And again, I appreciate you inviting me on here because actually having a discussion like this is super important.
It is. I agree 1,000%. But before I let you bounce, though, I want to talk a little bit about this coronavirus that's literally affecting everything and everybody in every kinds of ways. Yeah. Do you have a hot take on everything going on right now, or anything that comes to mind?
When it comes to politics, I think that the were you inspired to do this podcast because of coronavirus, or
this one?
Yeah.
No.
Because I feel like the coronavirus probably made people realize that, oh, hey, politics is kind of important.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I got you.
I mean, especially since people are probably going to be getting checks soon from the federal government.
Oh, yeah. That's also true.
You start to pay attention a little bit. It's like, oh, hey,
this politics is going to really affect me in a good
I'm
way.
about to get a check in the mail, so maybe I should pay attention to what's going on. But I'll tell you, that is exactly why things are happening, and that's why you see the biggest stimulus package. I mean, almost $2 trillion. That's why we see the largest stimulus package in modern history, is that people are actually paying attention, and they want to see something happen.
Yeah.
This is what happens when you have a mass mobilization of people that pay attention and want to see something happen.
Yeah.
And that's why we don't see action on a regular basis. Our politicians listen to us when we're upset. Our politicians listen to us when we have a bunch of people that want to see something happen. And when people feel frightened, that's when it happens.
Yeah.
That's why our politicians haven't passed a serious piece of legislation on gun control in how long? A very long time. A lot of people feel very passionate about gun control, whether it's for it or against it. But the thing is that when you have a mass mobilization of people that are being affected and they feel like they're in danger, that's when action happens.
Yeah, like wasn't it Australia that had that thing, and within 5-6 days their government was so not pressured, but so much of the public was like, we need change, and they did it so quickly.
This is kind of what concerns me, and this is what bothers me. It used to bother me, but at this point I've just kind of become like, man, it's fine.
Right.
Did you know, and I think if you've watched Bernie Sanders talk a lot, he talks about this statistic a lot.
Yeah.
The healthcare industry, every single year, 40,000 to 50,000 people die because they can't get the medicine or they can't afford the
Right.
healthcare that they need, right?
Right.
That's 40 to 50. That's the city that we live in every
Yeah.
single year, right? I think the death toll for the coronavirus just passed 1,000, which, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to downplay. I mean,
No.
we could see a lot. These numbers are going to rise.
Yeah.
And it's concerning.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, we have issues like healthcare that kill 40,000, 50,000, and it bankrupts almost 200,000 people a year. We have issues like this that are happening every single year, whether or not the coronavirus is here or not. So why do we see legislation being passed within weeks? I mean, this 1,000-page bill, the stimulus package, it was written and it's now been passed. It's going to be passed by the time that this comes out in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right? That's what happens when you get people involved in politics and when people feel like it matters to them.
Yes.
And that's what I want to see happening
all the time.
to issues that affect all of us. If you feel
agree.
like your politicians aren't representing you, you have to get up and talk. Whether you're Republican, you're a Democrat, go on social media if that's your preferred platform. Go out and work and talk to people and talk about the issues that are affecting us.
Yep.
That's kind of my main overarching thing with the coronavirus. Is I'm very concerned about it, but at the same time, I'm very glad to actually be seeing action being taken finally
It's
on
insane.
something.
Yeah, on something. Well, it's like, how do you feel about the stimulus package? Do you think it's going to be beneficial to everybody? Do you think it is going to be a little bit underworded? Because I think, me and my fiance were talking, our hours got cut, but I mean, we're still able to survive. So we're talking about, a little bit of the money, if we do get it, give back, donate to somebody, like America's Hunger. I can't remember what that organization is that Feeding America. But things like that, because we don't need it. So I'm thinking, man, there's going to be a lot more people out there that don't need it. But now I'm thinking there's a lot of people out there, like my friends' hours, like jobs got cut off. Like they have kids. Like I'm stressing out about them. I'm like, they really need the money,
Sure.
So I'm.
See, one more deep observation, and then I'll actually answer your question. Don't worry.
Right.
This is what the reason that people care now, and the reason that people want to see our government take action is, like we were saying, it impacts them.
Right.
Right. People are getting laid off. They're hurting. The nice thing, and I feel for every single one of those people, but I'm in a very privileged position here. I still live at home. My dad's self-employed. My mom works at ISU, but as far as I know, we're doing just fine.
Good.
We're not going to be, we're not at a position where we can't pay our rent. We're not at a position where we can't pay for food.
Right.
We're not at a bad position like what a lot of people are now. Right. And so when it actually impacts them, that's when people want to see action. But what I would like to see is everybody fighting for each other. I want to be able to fight for you as if what's impacting you is impacting me.
Right.
Right.
Agreed.
And I feel for people being impacted by the coronavirus and being laid off from their jobs. I mean, it's a very scary time for people. So I'm very happy to see the stimulus package being passed. It was 96-0 in the Senate, which
is crazy.
Thank goodness.
That's insane.
People are coming together, but it's a 1,000-page bill. It's 1,000 pages. Gage, when we were talking about doing this podcast, how long do you think our messages would? Do you think it would fill up a whole page, like our messages trying to organize this podcast? Like maybe even a page, half a page?
Yeah.
It's like we organize this podcast in like half of a page, but our government can't write a bill that's less than 1,000 pages. What's in those 1,000 pages, right? I haven't read the bill, and I'm sure that almost none of your viewers, if not any of your viewers, have actually read the bill. I'm sure that you haven't read the bill.
No, absolutely not.
Nobody has.
Have they even released the text at this point in time?
The text is here. We can read it. But who has time to read 1,000 pages?
Yeah, nobody. Who reads the terms and conditions? Nobody.
That's what, in the legislative process, that's what we call an omnibus bill. So an omnibus bill isn't something that's pertaining to just one specific topic. It's not saying guns are hereby outlawed and that's it. That's the only legislation, right? You can do gun control legislation, but you add up. Oh. See, I start flailing my arms when I... Wait, was that a camera? Oh. Okay, wait. When you edit this, can you please just have that camera shot?
I will, just falling, bro. You got it.
Anyways, as I was talking about, so this legislation is what's called an omnibus legislation. So there's multiple different things in it that don't even relate to the coronavirus, right?
Right.
So we have money going to citizens, but also like people were criticizing Democrats by trying to put in legislation for like voter registration,
Right,
tons of
right.
different things, right? The problem is with legislation, it's not just our legislators sitting in a room writing bills. They hardly ever write the bills. It's typically interest groups or groups of people with the same interests. So they try. There's what's called a policy window of opportunity. Is like, for example, if you wanted to pass gun control legislation, a good time to do it would to be after like a mass shooting, right? When the public is enraged and they want to see support for this, there's a window of legislation where they want this legislation passed. And sadly, this windows typically open up after like a national emergencies, like 9/11 was a huge policy window for legislation to get passed because the public wants to see it being passed. And so what interest groups and politicians want to do is they say, here's a really important thing for me. Like if you're a climate change activist group, you say they're going to pass a stimulus package. Let's try and get some wording in here that passes legislation for us, right?
Yes.
It's not just this coronavirus stimulus thing. It's a whole bunch of different interests coming in, and that's why we see a 1,000-page bill. But this is how the one-party system works. Is sadly, this is how there are parties compromise. Is they say, you give me this, I'll give you this, right? And so you just see adding on and on and on and on different wordings of the bill, different things in the bill to actually try and get some sort of compromise, even if it doesn't have anything to do with the coronavirus. So that's, I mean, I haven't read the whole entire bill, and I don't know exactly what compromises our officials came to. I'm very happy that we passed something. It seemed, so as far as I know, every single adult American will be getting $1,200 in the mail that make less than 75,000.
And then it slowly drops off up to 99,000.
Yes. So that's good. People need money right now. I don't know if $1,200 is going to cover it, but it's something at least.
Yeah, it's something.
They also offered support for small business and large businesses like airlines, cruise ships,
Which is really nice.
It's good, but at the same time, well, before different compromises were passed, like you said, I think the Treasury had like $500 billion to give out to different corporations, but they weren't going to tell anybody where that money was actually going until 6 months had passed,
right?
Which seems dangerous, and luckily that legislation was moved out of it. So yes, investing into companies and giving them money to save the companies is really good, but at the same time, we don't need to be bailing out Wall Street. We don't need to be bailing out major corporations. Corporations aren't people. We need to understand that corporations don't have feelings. They don't need food to survive. They don't need rent to survive. We shouldn't be necessarily bailing out corporations at this moment. We need to be bailing out the average worker. We need to be bailing out people who need money and who need finances to actually protect their livelihoods. So I'm really glad that at least something was passed. Could it have been better? Yes, but again, I'm just very glad that our government was able to compromise and find something to do for people.
Yep, I agree with. I'm interested to see how, because as a small business owner, I pay taxes, all that kind of stuff, and I'm interested to seeing about this loan thing, right? Like,
yeah,
I have a couple of weddings I've already called and refunded because of coronavirus. They can't have a wedding because of coronavirus, right? And I'm like, man, I'm negative a couple G's, you know, because I have to give everybody's money back. I have to do X, Y, Z, you know, especially investing in plane tickets and things like that. So it's like, I wonder how small of a business, because that will really tell me how our legislation really not thinks overall, but like just kind of like
who they prioritize in a way.
Yeah, and because like I'm not trying to be like, oh, me, but I'm like, how small would they be? I don't have any points. Like I'm like the smallest it gets. I'm just a what do they call it? Not an LLC, but a sole proprietorship, which is like the smallest a business can be.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be interesting to see how kind of all this kind of plays out.
I think the very important thing to advocate for too is, I know that they're giving grants to corporations and to companies and to small businesses. They're just going to give them money just straight up, like, here's money as long as you keep. I think one of the things is you have to keep employees.
Yes.
Is you have to keep people working or something.
I think that was their biggest problem, was they didn't want to just give them millions and millions of dollars just to fire their employees and pocket the money.
Which is great.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. But at the same time, we don't want to give out high interest loans at this time. And it just doesn't. It seems like you're taking advantage of people if you're trying to give out high interest loans at this point, because people will be taking out loans to try and survive this. But trying to charge back massive amounts of interest and get people into debt or into a certain poverty cycle, it just seems not something that we need right now.
Right. Do you think our leaders overall are handling this in the best of way? Do you think like our politicians, our public officials, everybody, like, do you think we are handling this okay?
Yeah. So in regards to the Trump administration, the response has kind of been back and forth. At first, it was very much downplayed. It was, don't worry about it.
It will go away. Yeah.
What did you hear? I mean, there was a couple of senators, Republican senators, not like it matters whether Republican or Democrat, who people are telling them that they should leave the Congress because in a private press conference, they heard just how bad the coronavirus might become. Out in public, they were saying that the coronavirus would be fine, but in private, they sold their stocks because they realized, that just doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
It seems like our public officials knew that this was coming, but they kind of downplayed it at first. It seems like they started
people calm and things.
I don't know if it was to keep people calm, but to keep the market steady, like you were saying.
Right.
I don't know exactly what the intentions were. Maybe they just didn't understand or realize it at the time. I mean, China, they were trying to keep this quiet for a while. They were silencing doctors who were trying to speak out and saying that the coronavirus is a problem. They even put them into detention centers. So the way that China handled it wasn't optimal, but once it came to the United States, it seemed like it was downplayed just a bit. I remember seeing Trump at a rally. I think he called the coronavirus response by the Democrats more of a media hoax to try and get the Trump administration like bad rap on how he's trying to handle it. But now that people are starting to realize that this is a legitimate problem, I think the Trump administration started handling it like they should. But right now, and I'm not sure, all of this can change by the time that this actually comes out, but it seems like right now the Trump administration is saying that they want the public and they want people back working before Easter.
Yeah.
Which the scientists are telling us that the worst is yet to come.
Yeah, they're saying it's a very, very dreamy time of date.
100%. And you're risking lives at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, I know why the Trump administration is doing it. They don't want the economy to keep tanking. I don't want the economy to keep tanking, right? But at the same time, we have to understand that lives are important. And sending people to work and sending people out to do regular business while this is going on, while this is at its peak, is not something that we should be promoting, right? And so I would caution to say that the Trump administration right now is doing an effective job at handling it. Essentially, I would say we need to realize the severity of what we're facing, and like I said, the scientists are projecting that in 6 or 7 weeks is going to be the worst time. It's going to have the peak cases, right? 6 or 7 weeks. That's after April.
Yeah.
So we need to be careful and we need to prioritize lives over the economy. But I understand why the Trump administration is doing it. I think if the economy stays the way it is and the coronavirus doesn't get handled before the general election, Trump is in real danger in the general election. And I'm not blaming this on Trump. Of course, the coronavirus wasn't caused by Trump.
But it's our leader.
It's our leader, and at the same time, people who don't necessarily super pay attention to politics, they might not realize that. They just think of, how is my family doing right now, right? When we're in an economic crisis and when people are struggling, they typically tend to go away from the incumbent.
Yeah.
So I think Donald Trump is scared right now of his reelection. His approval ratings are hanging steady at about 43%, which is a little low for reelection. So I think he's trying to get a handle on this before it spins out of control.
Right.
But it should be very interesting to see exactly what political repercussions it's going to have for the general election. And I'm glued to my seats and watching exactly what's happening just as much as everybody else.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. So last question. With all this happening, this coronavirus thing, and I know you kind of already answered it in a way, but like talking about how it's going to affect our overall election and things like that. I don't even think the Democrats did their primaries on Tuesday, did they? Because I think they shut everything down until further notice.
Yeah, so I know not this Tuesday, not the last Tuesday, but the Tuesday before, there was Florida, Illinois.
Yeah.
Ohio postponed their election, even though they were trying to fight that in the courts, but it ended up getting postponed. So yes, the primaries have been postponed as of now, which is, I mean, it's smart to do. We shouldn't be sending people out to risk their lives to vote.
Right.
At the same time, I'm trying to figure out exactly what this is going to mean for the general election.
That's what I get. Like, do you think our election for the president could be pushed back? Is that even possible? If so, like, would Trump remain president? Like, I'm just curious to see how this really is going to affect our election.
We live in unprecedented times, and this is the first time it's ever happened. And so it's really going to be up to the Supreme Court at this point. This essentially, if Donald Trump decides to postpone the election, just like what's happening with the Democratic primaries, the first thing it does is it gets challenged in the court, and the court has to rule it either constitutional or unconstitutional. I have a feeling that if Donald Trump tries to postpone the general election, that it probably will go up to the Supreme Court, which I'm not sure exactly on what the Supreme Court's voting record is on this specific issue, because we haven't seen anything like this. So really, it's hard to say. I don't even know if I would agree with postponing the general election. Like, I might. At the same time, it's so hard, because I mean, we don't want to see Donald Trump be remaining our leader without being voted in, right? Like, that's the first step towards dictatorship.
Right. So it's like, my question is like, and I know I get this every time. I'm like, why don't we do it like an online vote?
Yeah.
Not only do I feel like there would probably be more votes than normal and more convenient and more safe and all those things that kind of play in. And I get the whole, Russia will hack it, the hackers. And I'm like, I mean, we literally have companies like Google, Facebook, like all of these companies that literally don't get hacked. And it's to me, it's like, how is our government more likely to get hacked than like a corporation in America? You know what I'm saying? So like, why couldn't we like work with somebody or get some lead developers to develop some kind of simple way to do this digitally from home rather than going out and getting sick trying to vote for our next president?
Yeah, I would also, I think that's an ideal place to be in. It's very hard for, like you said, voter security to move things online. I think paper ballots are the most secure way to have elections. But if you have an online voting option, how are we keeping track of who's voting? How can we ensure that the vote is actually being given by the person who they say they are, right? Like, what are we going to ask for? Their social security number? What are we what would you need to vote? Right. And how can we ensure that this person is over 18? How can we ensure that this person says who they are? It seems like a very bad and slippery slope into a lot of issues with our election. And like I said, the most important thing for democracy is the sanctity of their elections. And when we have leaders or when we have people questioning the results of the election, that's when bad things start happening in democracies. Is people have to understand that the election is secure and that it's a fair and free election and that people are allowed to vote for whoever they want. And so I think if you can find a way to make it easier for people to vote, it's good. Whether that would be an online voting system, I'm not sure. But I would say that automatic registration when you turn 18 for voting, because people don't know how to register to vote. They don't. Yeah. They don't. I mean, I don't even understand it. It's too complicated. It depends on the state. Yeah, I think specifically we try and make elections a little bit more difficult than they should be. But I honestly do support anything that makes elections easier. And like I said, I think that's immediate voter registration when you're 18. We also have to ask ourselves, and this is also kind of a controversial topic, and I don't know enough about it as I should. But it's gonna be a good section in. I'm taking a civil rights and liberties class, and it's going to be the last section. It's like voter registering and voter suppression. Voter suppression is a very bad issue. Everybody should be able to vote if you're over 18. I don't know if that includes felonies or not. That's another debate. But it seems like, and from what I've heard, I'm in the middle of reading a book. It's called One Person No Vote. It's a great book about voter suppression. It seems like one of the only parties that seems to be engaging in this voter suppression is the Republican Party. And I'm not saying that Republicans are inherently bad people, but the problem is that I think Republicans in general just kind of rely on a lower voter turnout to remain in power. Like we were talking about with the different demographics of the parties, Democrats tend to get more votes from the minorities, people that don't vote typically on normal elections, the younger populations. The people that do vote older generations, more white people, educated people, those people tend to lean more Republican. So the Republican Party relies on making sure that it's hard to vote, or that people don't understand the voting process to remain in power. If everybody was forced to vote, which they do in some democracies where they say everybody has to vote or you're going to get thrown in jail, I think if that system was taking place, I think that Democrats would win every election. And that's just because the people that don't vote are younger people, they're voters of color, they're inherently disadvantaged populations that don't vote.
Right. That makes a lot of sense, though. It does make a lot of
So
sense.
making voting easier is definitely a big priority for us. And
Right.
how to do that, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
If you can make a safe system where people can log online and go to imgoingtovote.com or .org, .gov,
Then it might be.
click on one button and it says, who do you want to vote for?
Right.
And you fill out your information.
Yeah.
If they can figure out a way to do that safely, which I don't think can happen, but in an ideal world, that's what I would like to see happen. But it's very hard to implement that in an imperfect place.
An imperfect place.
Like we live in.
Yeah, I agree, man. And just being woke enough to understand that our leaders, even Bernie, everybody, like what they do is they're building a campaign. And like being a marketing person on campus, I'm also doing marketing and advertising. Like that's all you do is you take a product, a person, a brand, and you say, who's our audience? We're going to appeal to them.
Yeah.
And we're going to hit them, you know? And so like even just Republicans saying, hey, our audience is older people. Of course, they're going to make it a little bit more complicated. Like, but being woke and understanding of that. So, like they are doing this on purpose, which would be more of a reason for you to try to go vote.
Yes. And it's it seems like a burden, and it seems like a bad. I mean, it's hard to get educated properly. I mean, you can watch Fox News, you can watch CNN, and you can say, I know everything about politics, right? But going to school, you don't even have to go to school to understand politics. But doing your own independent, objective research on politics is very important, and it's hard. But at the same time, it's one of the many privileges that we take advantage of.
Right.
Across the globe, like in China, for example, there's one party, the Communist Party, right? And it doesn't necessarily matter what anybody in China thinks. I mean, if they speak out against their government, they're going to be imprisoned. But if a person in China wants to see their government act differently, the government doesn't care. Right. And so we're in a very special and also a very privileged place to, if we want to try and make an impact on our government and we want to try and vote for these people that will change the system, we can. And so we're almost in a privileged place where people need to, or it's their obligation to, try and get knowledge and information on these topics that we're talking about, so that they can so that they can vote for themselves, so that they can think for themselves. And it's a very privileged place to be in, and I'm very grateful to live in a society like this. I mean, the United States isn't perfect. Don't get me wrong.
It's imperfect.
It's imperfect. It's 100% imperfect.
The plug.
But we all need to be doing our best to get educated. The problem is we're just not seeing that happen.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the existential political crisis that I've been going through the last year or so. Is I don't think that people are putting in the effort to be the citizen that they should in a democracy. Like if you're a Republican and you're engaged in the political process, I'm 100% for that. Even though I disagree with a lot of the ideas that Republicans have, if you're politically engaged, I love that
because it's democratic. Yeah,
100%. But I think that's the problem with democracy, and that's bad to say, but I think that's just the objective problem with a system of government like democracy. Is it relies on informed citizenry who make independent decisions, and all of these different factors. Don't get me wrong, I would much rather just go on Netflix and watch my favorite show than to go to school every day to get up at 9:30. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love school, but at the same time, it's way easier to not.
Yeah.
Right? You have to put in the effort to do things, and sometimes you have to make sacrifices.
Yep, agreed.
And so I think that's one of the main flaws with democracy, is it relies on this informed citizenry that we're not necessarily seeing.
Agreed, man. Agreed 1,000%.
But it's good that we have conversations like this.
Yes, and getting people involved, like you said, regardless of your beliefs. Just like I love that message. If any celebrity or anybody with a platform can do is getting people to go out and vote, 100% agree.
But now I have a question for you. Do you think if somebody is in a position where they're uneducated about like what the candidates believe. Like there's tons of people that just go online and like they show Google searches from like the day of an election. You know what the most popular search thing was? Do you remember the Brexit vote that they had? You know what the most popular Google search on the day of whether or not the UK should leave the European Union or not? Do you know what the most popular Google search was? They asked, what is the European Union?
Oh, no.
So people try.
Oh, no.
People try to become educated, but it's typically a Google search the day of, right?
Yeah.
Do you think people like that should vote?
Everyone gets a say, man. It sucks. I mean, you take someone in there that has a doctorate in politics, and you have the next guy that's watching Fox News daily going in to vote. It's a vote. You're a person. You're a human being.
Yeah.
You know?
See, there's systems. This is kind of where the philosophy comes into my political science degree. This is why I love studying all of these things, is because they kind of all come together. Different political philosophers critique democracy, and they think that you shouldn't have uneducated populaces. You should just have like an aristocracy where only the smartest people are allowed to vote. People who are college educated should be allowed to vote. You know how many? There's so many problems with that. Like, but at the same time, I also see the benefits of that. There's different political systems throughout the world. Should we only have the educated people or the people that know that are voting?
Right.
Of course, there's tons of problems that will come from that. Like, who are the people that are being educated? What are they being educated about? There would be tons of problems with that. But that just goes to show how imperfect the system is.
Yep.
And it goes to show how complicated the issues are.
Yeah, true. That's why we're voting for people that do know, or at least practice a little bit more in their field, you know. See,
and this is also the scary. Are we running long on time? I don't want to.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
This is the scary thing, I think, with even Bernie Sanders too. Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump are both populist candidates, and populist in the sense that they appeal to the everyday person. In a sense, well, they try and put the blame on longtime politicians. They say that longtime politicians or the elites or the 1%, they don't get things done, and this is the way that's working now. And we need a government that focuses on the everyday person, right? That's essentially a populist message in a way. So a lot of people say, I'm tired of these career politicians. I'm tired of these career elite bureaucrats that are running the federal government. And so who do we elect? The American public elects a person like Donald Trump, who doesn't have any political experience, doesn't know hardly anything about politics, I bet you that right now I know more about Donald Trump than when he got elected, or I know more about politics than when Donald Trump got elected, right? Or I know more about politics than Donald Trump did when he got elected, right?
Gotcha.
Donald Trump didn't know anything about politics. I mean, obviously he's the president of the United States. He's very informed on how our government works now. He knew everything about business, and he wanted to run the country like a business. And that's what a lot of people thought that our country needed. And I think it's scary that we're moving away from people who don't have political experience in the name of trying to get somebody more like me, or trying to get somebody more like the common everyday person, when the highest office in our land, like the presidency, the most powerful position in the whole entire world, the most influential person, it can't be this everyday Joe Schmo.
Yeah.
It has to be a person who knows the ins and outs, who understands the way that the political process works.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have to keep electing the same people over and over again. Don't get me wrong, but we need to be electing people with experience.
Agreed.
On how to run things. I mean, Donald Trump he did great with his business. Don't get like, I admire him. The way that he ran his business. I mean, he built a multi-billion-dollar. He's worth multi-billions.
Yeah.
Right.
He's
worth tons of money. But at the same time, that's not what's needed to run a country.
Yep. Agreed, man. It's insane.
It's a very complicated topic.
It is, man. But that's exactly why I wanted to bring you on here, is to kind of learn and study and grow. And I love that. And that's my biggest thing. And I don't mean to like downplay you or your politics or your beliefs, but I think asking people, and people that have a little bit more knowledge of me in that, area of what is he doing right and what is he doing wrong. Because in my life, I have Democrat friends and I have Republican friends, and it's he's the best or he is the worst.
Yeah.
And I absolutely cannot believe that.
Yeah.
I have to believe that people are doing good things, and I have to believe people are doing bad things, because it's not black and white.
Sure.
I feel like I'm a very good, decent human being, but I'm sure there's people in my past I probably don't think the best of me.
Yeah.
And people that think the greatest of me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And I know that you brought me here to question me about things, but I want to ask you, people are watching this and they say, oh, like, they might agree with me, they might disagree with me, they might think I'm a complete idiot, they might think I'm smart, right? It doesn't matter. At the same time, I think a lot of people agree that the way that our politics is working right now is dysfunctional.
Yes. Yeah.
The dialogue that we're having with each other is dysfunctional, right? When I step outside the door of this podcast, when I'm leaving, when I'm going home, the world continues. The world continues the way it is, right? Even though people are watching this, they're not going to become perfect citizens. They're not going to become completely informed citizens, right? So I guess after this podcast, like, what can you do differently? Because I'm a strong advocate in being the change that you want to see in the world.
Right.
Tons of people say, oh, like... as I was telling you before, I turned vegetarian like 3 weeks ago, right? I adamantly disagree with factory farms. I very much disagree with just the creating suffering in general, right? And people say, what is one person going to do? What is what difference are you going to make, right? That's the main argument with not voting, right? It's like, I'm just one person. Like, what am I going to do? But I'm a very strong believer in being the change that you want to see in the world. So I guess what can we do? What can you do specifically differently to try and change this? Because it starts with one individual at a time, right?
Exactly. And I feel like my biggest thing is, I can't really show you, but I got a tattoo a while ago of imperfection, because I realized, like, I want to be the guy that realizes my imperfections and fixes them and increases them and builds upon them and become the better human being in the world. And I had this brand idea in my head, just tattooing myself years ago, until I built this podcast built on people realizing that we're all imperfect.
Yeah.
That's how it is. We're all imperfect.
100%.
Like, you have your beliefs. Yes, you have your beliefs because of XYZ, your experiences, your education, your parents, your family, your friends, your economic status, where you live. All of these things play a part, because, again, it's not black and white. It's the things that you experience as a human being.
Yeah.
But as we get older and learn more and grow, like especially in a college environment, I feel like we're learning more about our imperfections. So if I can encourage other people about, all these other human beings on this planet, like, this is this person, like, and I would absolutely love for a Republican to watch this and understand someone else's side.
Yeah, for sure.
And learn about someone else's side. That way they don't just like, oh, this is my view, this is it. Yeah. My sole goal is to get my family, my Republican family, my friends, to not swap sides, but understand. I don't want anybody to change their beliefs.
Yeah.
I just want them to be okay.
Yep.
And live in a world where it's okay to live with other people that may disagree, because that's the whole saying, agree to disagree.
Right.
I just hate that it's, this person should die, Donald Trump should die, and they want harm, they want these bad things to happen, rather than just be okay with our environment, realizing your imperfections, realizing other people's imperfections, but growing on ourselves.
Sure. See, you keep on bringing up interesting questions that I want to ask you about. I mean, we can apply this a lot. We can apply this to everything that we do, right? I mean, every single person that we interact with is completely different. Yeah. Even if I meet a social democrat or a Democrat who wears colorful pants, and,
right,
right, they're not going to be the same person as me. Even though we have a lot in common, we're not the same person. Nobody's the same person. Nobody. Right? So what about people who are intolerant? What about people who don't want to see dialogue happening between people who are different?
That's their opinion. That's who they are, I guess.
So you think that we should be tolerant of people who are intolerant of others?
I don't know.
It's hard.
I don't know. It's hard. A very, again, this is black and white. It's not always good and bad.
100%.
And
like I keep on bringing up, we live in a society with tons of people, and not everybody's going to realize that people are different and that their lifestyle isn't the only way to live. And I think that living with people like that is very difficult, but at the same time, coming to understand that everybody has a different point of view, even if that point of view is intolerant, that there could be some value in tolerating that for sure.
Exactly. Even though I may never change my family's minds or ways of thinking or anything like that, it's just my advocacy and trying to get other people to do the same is be yourself, be who you are, love yourself, spread positivity, realize your imperfections, grow upon yourself, because only you can change you. Yeah. You can't change everybody. Yeah. You can't change the person next to you, but you can change you.
Yeah.
and you should try to be the best human being you possibly can be.
For sure.
You know,
you should have, if you ever decide to do another political topic again, I bet you, well, as long as this video doesn't get 1 billion dislikes, because
like if you want to see John again.
No, I think you should have somebody else who knows about politics who disagrees with me. I would love to listen to a podcast like that. Somebody who absolutely loves Donald Trump, and maybe ask him some of the same questions that I do.
I will.
I bet you that the conversation will go completely different in a lot of ways, but I would love to hear what their perspective is.
Exactly. It's all about perspectives. That's the whole goal, is trying, like this conversation. What will it do? What can I do? I don't know, but I know that I, myself, my own being, mental state of mind, can try.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I started a group on Facebook called Imperfect Fam, where people can post their imperfections and get education or knowledge or discussion from other people. So someone will post, I think I'm large. I don't like working out. I'm happy with myself, but my family keeps like bothering me about me being fat. And all these people are like, dude, you need to love yourself, blah, blah, blah. Like they give their own insight. And, I'm like, that's my question. Is this really helping people? Are really people changing? Are they really listening to people? Are they really do they just want to post that they're fat and then be done with it and they're never going to change who they actually are? Until I posted something personally to a similar nature, and someone said something that, you do you, and if you want to like lose weight and things like that, do it after school and all these things when you actually have more time and things. And it resonated with me. I'm like, oh my God. And I felt so much more calmer about my weight, my mental, like how I look, how I think, because somebody else was able to relate with me.
Sure.
So it's like, it's just an ongoing process.
I think feeling comfortable with things that you're uncomfortable with is kind of what imperfection is about. So I don't think that we should strive to feel perfect in order to feel good.
No, yeah, you will never be perfect.
Agreed. A lot of people think that they are, though.
Yeah, I know.
And that's how people cope. If you struggle with a weight problem, or if you struggle with I struggle with tons of different problems, right? And I don't go looking for people to be like, oh, that's not a problem, right? You don't have a problem. If you don't recognize the weeds that are in your own garden, they're just going to overtake the garden, right? You need to recognize that they're there, but you have to either work towards fixing them and be okay with it.
Yes, agreed.
And if you're not okay with it, if you're uncomfortable with it, then it's almost always in your control to change.
Yeah, you can change it.
100%. I know that you brought me on here to talk about politics, but now it's shifting into. I also love. I've always wanted to just by myself do motivational speaking, or not even necessarily.
Me too.
Not even necessarily motivational speaking, but also just, I don't know, maybe having conversations like this.
Yeah.
And you're right. I need to.
Definitely need to. I saw the car video.
Yes,
sir.
sir.
You're sitting in the car and you're like, Democrats, listen.
And actually, before that, I didn't have social media just because a lot of the issues that we've been talking about with like algorithms and stuff. Yeah. I just realized that it's not the greatest to bring into my life. I mean, it's fine for some people. It depends on how much you use it and stuff. Yeah. But before that, I wasn't using any social media. And even before that, I was posting some videos just about the mentality that I have towards things. Like, I don't know if you remember, but when we were working together at Dick's Sporting Goods, I weighed about 255 pounds, but I lost about 55. I got down to 200. I mean, fitness has kind of become one of my great hobbies and great passions as of recently. But like you said, if you don't like something in your life, I really think that in 99.9% of the time, it's within your control to change.
Agreed.
And so realizing that you can change it is the first step to take.
Exactly.
And that's what you should do with your imperfections. Yeah. Is either you have to learn to be happy with your imperfections and be happy with yourself, or you can change it.
Yep. Agreed. 1,000% agreed.
And that's what we need to do with our political mentalities.
Yes, we do, man. We really do. Well, John, I want to thank you so much for coming out. Learn a little bit, grow a little bit, educate a little bit. I love it, man.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And it's, like I said, as long as people are more confused now than they were at the beginning, I did my job.
And then we did it. Yeah.
But the nice thing is I don't pretend to be an expert in these things. And so you bringing me on here and having a discussion with me, I learned a lot too.
Well, thank you, man.
Yeah, and so it's kind of a mutual benefit type thing. And so I appreciate you bringing me on here, and I really love the things that you have going on here. and I'll be for sure watching a lot of these episodes after this too.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, man. Thank you for the love. Thank you guys for watching. I love y'all. Peace out.